This week has been a dramatic one in the trial of Donald Trump, the first ever criminal prosecution of a former American president. Key witness Michael Cohen spent 3 days on the stand, and of course, Stormy Daniels testified as well. But there's also been less sensational but important testimony from others, including Trump's close aide, Hope Hicks. Now that we've seen the evidence, Luke, do you think that this case should have gone forward?
Well, when we consider an issue like this, we first have to consider the standard for charging somebody with a crime in the United States, and that's probable cause. And I think what we've gleaned from the trial so far is that there's definitely probable cause that a crime was committed. I don't think there's much doubt that the sex acts in question occurred, and there's a pretty illustrious paper trail of the related payments and the larger context of the campaign in terms of trying to prevent perceived damage towards candidate Trump. I mean, one of the things that stood out to me in the recent testimony by Michael Cohen was that this didn't only happen during the campaign. Cohen went to the Oval Office and talked to Trump as president because Trump hadn't paid him the money that he was supposed to. And as president, allegedly, Donald Trump said that I will pay you, it will be taken care of. If you're a prosecutor, I don't think you can look at that evidence and turn the other way.
Nina?
Yeah, I actually don't think that this case should have been brought. And let me preface it by saying I'm someone who thinks that Trump he's really horrible for the country because he traffics in hate and division, race baiting, and all of the other things that appeal to the worst in us. But setting aside for now the legal aspects of this case, I think about the political ramifications. And so I think that if he were to win, and by the way, I will say this, that I think this is the weakest of the three cases that could have been brought against him and were brought against him. But as to the political ramifications, if he were to win in this case, that basically bolsters his claim that this was a witch hunt, and I think it boosts his chances of winning the election. And even if he loses, he's not going to get prison time because he's a first-time offender. And usually, if we follow what usually happens, that means he's not going to get time. And then that also means that half of the country will vote for someone who is a convicted felon, proven to have broken the law. And I worry about what that means. Is it sort of a sliding toward Gomorrah?
And he could very well win the case. I mean, a lot of it hinges on on Michael Cohen's testimony. And
yeah, I think there's a really good chance he's going to win here because, first of all, the misdemeanor charge is stale. It's beyond the statute of limitations, and it's basically a bookkeeping offense. And Trump did not have his fingerprints on the records. He was not the one who had organized the records. And so the misdemeanor is the basis for the felony charge, which is that he attempted to somehow swindle voters in order to win the election. But I can point to 538 suspects on Capitol Hill that possibly stretched the truth in order to win the election.
Rick?
You know, I sort of fall somewhere in between Luke and Nina here. You know, for me, this has a lot of similarities with the Bill Clinton, Monica Lewinsky debacle. You know, you have irresponsible behavior clearly that then spills over into illegal activity to cover it up. But I still think that this should go forward, basically because I think it's important for people to see that this is not a one-off the way it appeared to be with Clinton. With Trump, this is part of a consistent set of behaviors that show that he thinks he's above the law, that he can do whatever he can. Even if he wins this case, the fact that the other ones are coming through showing the same type of pattern of behavior, I think needs to be shown.
Well, it does give insight into the man, but I mean, at this point, I mean, we pretty much know who he is.
But there have been some signs that polls are showing that people think that if he is found guilty of this, that it means that many more people think that he is not qualified to be president. So I think it's important in going forward with these cases.
Yeah, and yet the public opinion polls have actually shown him to be leading more and more the longer this case goes on.
Tara?
Well, you know, there's 2 points here. I think you're absolutely right. There are some polls that are showing that people feel, even if they're supporters of his, that they aren't comfortable with voting for a convicted felon. Now, will that mean that they just don't vote at all, or will they vote for someone else, you know, a third-party candidate? That it remains to be seen. You know, most of those same people are saying we definitely won't vote for Biden. But the other problem with this is that I absolutely agree. It's important to show that even the president is not above the law, and that the lengths to which this president was willing to go to make sure he first won the election, and then to make sure that this was hidden. I think it's very important for the American public to see that even those who support Trump still need to see that our democracy does function the way it is supposed to function. Now, the sad thing about it is, and this is something we haven't touched upon, is sort of the greater political ramifications in terms of this trail of folks who are there to support him. And that, I think, is an unintended consequence of this trial, and no prosecutor could have foreseen
One thing
this.
that's interesting about that I found very curious is very similar to the Clinton-Lewinsky thing. Core groups that support Trump should be outraged at this. Social conservatives, evangelicals, his behavior, irresponsible. But it was the same thing under Clinton. Women's groups should have been outraged at his behavior, but because they liked his policies, they sort of ignored, you know, the personal behavior. So I think that that's another parallel between the two cases.
Yeah, but Clinton, it wasn't just Monica Lewinsky with him. There were other improprieties that he was accused of. There was also his own Paula Jones. But to echo some of what you've both said, I think that ultimately there has to be an effort to persuade those who will continue to vote for him. And by the way, only 20% of his voters have said that they would rethink voting for him were he to be convicted of a felony. And so, again, here, you know, you have to, I'm not necessarily going to blame them if they continue to support Trump, because we're talking about a New York prosecutor in a blue city that is attempting to reel in a candidate in a national presidential election when federal prosecutors declined to do so.
But so you're suggesting that they're doing this it's a politically biased prosecution?
I can't get in their head, but what I can say is that's how it is going to be perceived. That is how it is being perceived. And perception is reality.